everyone, it's Danielle Taylor with Keller Williams Realty here on the beautiful Outer Banks. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about something that's been coming up a lot lately with some newer buyer clients that I'm working with. And I actually had a meeting earlier this week with a buyer client where we sort of started talking about this topic. And the topic is cash flow. And so when we're initially working through the process with new buyers, we once we identify some ideas and some properties, the next thing that we typically do is start taking a look at things from a financial perspective. And so when we do that, we're laying out the revenue that the property is bringing in, we're putting in all of the expenses, including debt servicing if there's a loan involved, and looking at the bottom line. And I'm talking about properties where the owners want to use it some for friends, family, whatever, and then also rent it. So I'm not talking about pure investment where there's no personal use, those kinds of things. I'm just talking about how the majority of people, what they want to do with it. And oftentimes when we shake it all out initially, it comes out that the owner is coming out of pocket some every year to own the property. And usually the eyes get really wide and people say to me, Danielle, I thought these things all paid for themselves. And that starts a whole other dialogue. And so what I'm going to encourage you to do is, instead of being discouraged by that initial thought, I want you to encourage you to ask a different question. And that question is, even though it looks this way today, is there a pathway for this property to cash flow? So I want you to do that because I don't want to throw out some really great properties without looking at if there's a chance for this thing to fit your needs, okay? There's some things to think about. So in the immediate and short-term time frames, could you reevaluate how much you're putting down? So obviously your down payment affects the amount of loan that you have, and with today's interest rates, lowering the loan amount could make a really big difference on your bottom line. So that's one thing you could think about. You could also go through all the top line expenses. Are there any quick wins that we could do to reduce those top line expenses so that it's costing you less to operate the property? Doing a super deep dive into the rental income. So is there an opportunity for us to increase the rental rates? Are we comparable to what other properties are renting for? Could we increase that revenue? Could we look at the rental property management? Is there a model that you could follow that might fit better, that might reduce expenses and or provide you with better occupancy and better rental numbers? So now that might not be an immediate for this coming summer. That might be a more, shorter term thing for next summer, but is there a pathway? Remember, we're talking about a pathway. So thinking about rental management. Calendar, is the calendar opened? Could you open it more? Could you take less peak weeks and affect the bottom line? So those are some short-term things you could do. You could also look at, are there some really inexpensive improvements, sprucing, things that you could do to make the property visually more attractive, which would help rates and occupancy, would rent faster. So there's maybe some top line things that we can do to try to drive the rental rates up and reduce expenses in the short term. Over the long term, what happens if interest rates drop? So there's no guarantee on this, but again, we're asking ourselves the question, what would have to happen to make this property cash flow? So what if the interest rates went back to sort of that 5% range? How does that change the equation for you if you do a refi? Are there longer term, larger improvements that you could do that would dramatically increase the amount of rent that you could charge? Is there space you could add? Could you add a pool? Could you add a hot tub? Are there things like that that would help? And finally, as you start to learn how the property management side of things works, could you move to more of a self-management model? Would that help you over time once you learn the business to reduce those expenses? So I say all of this to say we may want to ask ourselves the question, is there a pathway to do it? Also, don't forget, talk to your financial planners and CPAs. There can be some positive tax benefits from even the property, even if it is operating at a loss. And it is still a great way to diversify your portfolio. So hopefully that helps. And as always, don't forget to subscribe and make sure you reach out if you have questions about this and about, in general, the pathway to cash flow. Hope you have a great day.